one of the core elements of the book is his written correspondence with Dick Winters, because that truly gave us an insider perspective, perspectives in which they were very candid with each other about what they did and what they did not do during the Second World War. And so that was one of the really fascinating things, is that you saw these older men coming to terms with their celebrity that they were sometimes uncomfortable with.
An excerpt from today's guest, whose latest book sheds light on one of the most enigmatic figures of Easy Company. Historian Jared Frederick is here to discuss Fierce Valor, the true story of Ronald Speirs and his band of brothers. And I'll speak with him right after this break. I'm Robert Child, and this is Port of the Spear. I've just released a brand new documentary you can watch online for free on Tubi, the streaming service from Fox. The show is called Weather and Warfare, Millennia to Modern Time.
Weather and Warfare dramatically retraces the meteorological forces during battlefield engagements that doomed or saved civilizations. In 1588, more than half of the Spanish Armada, on its way around northern Britain, was destroyed by storms in retreat back to Spain. Napoleon's attack on Russia was stopped cold by winter weather, as was Hitler's siege of Leningrad.
Just click on the link in this episode's description to watch on the web, or download the app, or watch on Roku for free. I hope you check it out. Welcome back. Today's guest is a history instructor at Penn State Altoona. He's also a former park ranger at the Gettysburg National Military Park and hosts the popular YouTube channel Real History. His new book is called Fierce Valor, the true story of Ronald Speirs and his band of brothers. It came out yesterday, and author Jared Frederick joins us now. Jared, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, sir. And last time we spoke about your book on Dick Winters, and is this new book, an outgrowth of that? How did this come about?
Yeah, in October of 2021, we did a book about Dick Winters that looked at his wartime correspondence and incorporated some of his artifacts in it as well. And I would say that Fierce Valor is in many ways an offshoot or a sequel of sorts to that book, because as we were researching Dick Winters and the material that my co-author Eric Dorr at the Gettysburg Museum of History had accumulated, we realized that we truly had an abundance of information on Ronald Speirs. And a lot of that just kind of accidentally fell into place, given the level of written correspondence that Dick Winters maintained with Ronald Speirs between the 1980s and the 2000s. And in addition to that, we were able to reach out to some family members. We were able to do some deep diving on genealogy. And we found reference to him in all of these hidden places that, to our knowledge, no other historians had ever encountered. But really, the one of the core elements of the book is his written correspondence with Dick Winters, because that truly gave us an insider perspective, perspectives in which they were very candid with each other about what they did and what they did not do during the Second World War. And so that was one of the really fascinating things, is that you saw these older men coming to terms with their celebrity that they were sometimes uncomfortable with.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, Speirs gained a reputation in Easy Company as a fearless warrior, and also his nickname was Killer. Can you relate the incident where he actually shot one of his own men?
Yeah, and I won't give away too much of the story, but in short, in the immediate aftermath of D-Day, Speirs had a very volatile confrontation with a replacement sergeant. And my co-author and I, we know the name of the sergeant, but we opted to keep his name anonymous because we found out that the sergeant still has some siblings who are still alive today. Oh. And the last thing that we wanted to do was to create this shocker of a revelation for family members who thought that their beloved uncle or sibling had died a heroic death on D-Day. Yeah. But we were able to find some first-person accounts and interviews predominantly through the generosity and the scholarship of airborne historian Mark Bando. And Mark Bando was really able to connect a lot of the dots for us on this incident and other events regarding Speirs' life in the 101st Airborne. But the short of the matter is that this sergeant became intoxicated, had a little bit too much Calvados, perhaps, in the fervor of liberation, as was often the case with many airborne troopers. And he grew belligerent. And he wanted to go attack a fixed German position. Speirs told him to remain in place, wait for American armor to come up from Utah Beach to help them flush out those positions. And the sergeant did not take too kindly to that. And the sergeant started going for his Thompson submachine gun, and purportedly Speirs said, if you're going to go for your gun, you better use it. And so that is, in fact, what happened. And it was a pure act of self-defense. Right. Speirs pulling his own weapon on this recalcitrant sergeant. And so where all of this becomes a bit muddled, and where a lot of the controversy or scuttlebutt or rumors fall into place, is that same week, Speirs' company commander was killed in action right outside of Carentan. Oh. And so that did not afford Speirs the formal opportunity to clear his name. And additionally, too, as Dick Winters wrote on more than one occasion, they needed capable officers in the field. And they did not have time to be doing inquiries or investigations because paratroopers were falling to the left and the right. And ultimately, Speirs could serve better on the front line rather than in the guardhouse.
Now, he was fearless in battle when they started moving out away from the peninsula. And there's an incident where he has to get a message across the front lines, and the radio's out, and this is actually portrayed in the Band of Brothers miniseries. Can you talk a little bit about how he got that message across German lines through enemy fire?
Speaking about the incident at Foy?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yes, in January 1945, just a few weeks after the 101st Airborne famous stand at Bastogne, the division was moving northward, and they were capturing these little crossroads village one after another in domino fashion. And this leads to perhaps the most celebrated moment of the Speirs myth or celebrity. The Easy Company commander, an officer by the name of Norman Dyke, either froze in the midst of combat, and there were other paratroopers, though, who insisted that Norman Dyke was actually wounded in the attack on Foy, Forrest Guth, a paratrooper being one of them. But in any case, Winters sends Speirs in to relieve Dyke and to push the attack on into town. And it was very chaotic. You had, multiple platoons moving forward, and communication and synchronization was key. And one of the great fears that Speirs had as his men were moving into town is that I Company on Easy Company's flank, simultaneously moving into town, might accidentally start shooting at the men of Easy Company. And it's then when Speirs very famously, essentially runs through the German lines to connect up with I Company. He's, making hand signals. He reaches out to one of the fellow officers in I Company, a man by the name of Roger Tinsley, and he tells them, cease your fire. We're moving into town. Be careful of where you aim your muzzles. And so he tells Tinsley that, and then Speirs turns around to reconnect with his platoons, and mere seconds later, Tinsley is shot through the chest by enemy machine gun fire. And so had Speirs not moved when he did, it's in the realm of possibility that he would have been struck down with Tinsley. And this was a repetitive theme in his story, that he just kept having one close call after another. He was wounded in Normandy. He was wounded in Holland. He's nearly killed here in the attack on Foy. And so he had this very grim sense of good fortune throughout his time in Europe. And certainly the attack on Foy was one of them.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Next time, author Tom Clavin will be here to discuss his new book, To the Uttermost Ends of the Earth, the epic hunt for the South's most feared ship and the greatest sea battle of the Civil War.
It's totally unknown to most everybody that there was a battle at sea between two warships, the Confederate CSS Alabama and the Union USS Kearsarge. This was an all-out broadside-to-broadside battle between these two ships, and only one was going to survive. It wasn't like they were going to go their separate ways and we'll see you another day. This was a fight to the death.
That's next time. Now, he ended up taking command of Easy Company from Dick Winters. How was that transition? How did he settle into command? Was he comfortable with it?
Well, he takes command of the company. Winters essentially gives it to him when it appeared that Norman Dyke was not up to the task. But he fit very well into the company. And I'd say that's one of the interesting angles of our book, Fierce Valor, is that a lot of our narrative is spent with his time in D Company, Dog Company, as it was known, because a lot of people don't realize that up until January of 1945, he was with this other company and not Easy Company. But he would go on to become the longest serving commander of Easy Company, essentially until it was disbanded months after the Second World War comes to an end. And one reason why he fits so well into Easy Company as its commander is because he had already established a rather fierce reputation for himself that had spread throughout the entire regiment.
Right.
And so say what you will about some of the rumors, and some of them grew, exceedingly wild and colorful, far beyond the scope of reality. But sometimes it did not matter what actually happened. It mattered what men believed had happened. And this was most certainly the case in regard to his transition into Easy Company. And everybody realized that he was a man not to be trifled with. But eventually, by the time we get to the end of the war, a lot of the men did warm up to him. And you see that in some of his correspondence and some of the reminiscences written later on. And so he wasn't always a cold-blooded killer, as many people thought he was. There was a warm side to him. And it's one that, he imbued his men with camaraderie.
That was one of my questions, and maybe this applies, is, going beyond him being seemingly one-dimensional, were there things that you discovered about him that surprised you in your research?
Very much so. This was a man who was not only an efficient platoon or company leader. In many ways, it's a love story. He had 4, perhaps 5 wives throughout his lifetime. And when I spoke to one of his step great grandchildren, it has a very sort of interesting genealogy and many branches to his family tree because of his various marriages. But all of his family reminiscences of him are very warm, tender. He was very quiet, an absolute gentleman, and it really sort of went against the grain of what we were told about Ronald Speirs. But when I asked one of his step grandsons, how can you reconcile the fact that he was married 4 or 5 times, but everybody has these very kind, thoughtful memories of him, within the family. Right. And he said something that I thought was profoundly true when I thought about it in hindsight. And, his grandson said that he was married to the Army. He had a very long career that, went 20 years beyond the Second World War. And unfortunately, that wreaked a lot of havoc and uncertainty in regards to his domestic life. And it wasn't until the 1980s where he married his final wife, and he was married to her for well over 20 years. And the reason why the marriage lasted is because he was out of the Army by that point. And so that was definitely one of the surprising things. is that there was a tender side to him, and people had very warm memories of him.
And that leads into my next question. He did serve, obviously, after World War II in later conflicts, which I don't think is widely known. Can you talk a little bit about his service after World War II?
Yes, right after the Second World War, a lot of people don't realize that the 101st Airborne was actually disbanded for a time after the Second World War, because there was this thought that what do we need two airborne divisions for? We just ended the World War. And so he joined the 82nd for a time, and he flip-flops back and forth to various units at stateside positions. But he eventually ends up with the esteemed Rakkasans, a very elite airborne unit, and he serves with them throughout much of the war in Korea. And beginning in the fall of 1951, he finds himself in some very fierce instances of combat that were just as perilous as anything that he saw in World War II Europe. He survived 2 more combat jumps. He rose to the rank of major while he was in the Korean War. And this is where we really had to do a lot of interesting investigative work, because there was a lot less secondary information about his service in Korea. And so I think readers will be really surprised by what they find in regard to his service during that conflict. But thereafter, he serves as an advisor during the Laotian Civil War in the summer of 1961. And so he was, essentially, serving as an advisor in one of these proxy wars in Cold War Southeast Asia. And most surprisingly of all, we found trace evidence that after he formally retired from the U.S. Army, he found himself in a State Department job in none other than the U.S. Embassy in Saigon in Vietnam, as we get into 1964, 1965. And the U.S. ambassador to Vietnam at that time was none other than Maxwell Taylor, who was his former division commander during the Second World War. And so we highly suspect that Ronald Speirs was involved in clandestine operations around the time that the Vietnam War was starting to heat up.
Yeah, I would probably imagine that was true as well. That's a good bet. Shifting gears to a final question. You have a popular channel on YouTube. It's called Real History, right?
Correct.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that and how you launched that and why.
Our YouTube channel, Real History, got started as a pandemic project with a friend and I. His name is Andrew Collins. He's a U.S. Army veteran, an amateur filmmaker of sorts. And I would often go visit, his house, his wife, and we would inevitably end up watching historical films, and I would always be giving color commentary throughout. And he eventually just came to the conclusion, why don't we just put a camera in front of you and let's start putting your commentary on YouTube? And so I took him up on that challenge, and we've been doing that for well over a year. We've analyzed several dozen historical films, and it's essentially a history versus Hollywood channel. And a lot of your listeners and viewers may be familiar with reaction videos to movies and TV shows that you can find that are replete on YouTube. And so we decided to alter that formula a little bit, and rather do just a first time reaction video, actually give a historian track with commentary that takes the story a little bit deeper for some really well-known historical films. So I encourage people to check it out. And we have an episode by episode breakdown of both Band of Brothers and The Pacific, which are some of our most popular episodes.
I was going to ask you that because do you do things like historical accuracy? Do you point out things in the series that aren't quite true?
Yes, that's exactly what we do. We talk about what historical films get right, what they get wrong, perhaps what they could have done better, and also some interesting behind the scenes commentary and making of production notes as well.
I encourage everyone to check out Real History with Jared. The book is called Fierce Valor, the true story of Ronald Speirs and his band of brothers. Thanks for coming back on the show today.
Thank you very much.
That's it for this episode. Thanks again for joining me. Next time, author Tom Clavin will be here to discuss his new book, To the Uttermost Ends of the Earth, the epic hunt for the South's most feared ship and the greatest sea battle of the Civil War.
It's totally unknown to most everybody that there was a battle at sea between two warships, the Confederate CSS Alabama and the Union USS Kearsarge. This was an all-out broadside-to-broadside battle between these two ships, and only one was going to survive. It wasn't like they were going to go their separate ways and we'll see you another day. This was a fight to the death.
That's next time. And if you like what you hear, leave a review or a rating or just click the follow button. And be sure to check out our Point of the Spear YouTube channel with bonus video material plus full military history documentaries. There's tons to explore, and I hope you check it out. I'm Robert Child, and this has been Point of the Spear.
Music licensed from audioblocks.com. Point of the Spear is produced by RSC Media Group.